Welcome, everybody. It's good to see faces and familiar friends, and those of you that are joining with this USIEA briefing for the first time. I want to move quickly to introduce my good friend, Ambassador Tom Nides, and so thankful to have him with us today. He has obviously in great demand to be able to communicate on the subject matter of this war that has broken out in the Middle East. His time as the U.S. ambassador, he stepped down from the position this summer, but certainly has played a dynamic role over these last few years, not just with Israel, but in the region, and really going through a rather tough time with the nation of Israel during this judicial reform. And he has been a great, great leader. We admire you very much, Ambassador Nides, and thank you for being with our pro-Israel group today. We have a wide range of people on this call. I want to just ask you several questions. One, just to start, the unthinkable happened to our closest ally in the world, the nation of Israel. They have experienced an unspeakable atrocity, and one that we know cannot ever be allowed to happen again. What consequence would Israel face in the future if they don't have a decisive and complete victory over Hamas, removing their political and military position over Gaza, and even their aspiration to attack Israel again? History has shown that the U.S. and world leaders add pressure to stop operations prematurely with Gaza due to a variety of reasons: humanitarian, civilian casualty, pressure from regional allies. What do you think is different about this war? Do you believe this administration will be able to stand with Israel until their objectives are completed?
Well, Heather, thank you. First of all, as Heather correctly says, we are very close friends and had the opportunity on many, many occasions to spend time with Heather and her team on a bunch of groups that were coming through that Heather was organizing in Israel, both members of Congress, members of the Senate, faith-based leaders. So I'm honored to be here. And when she asked me to do it, I quickly said yes, because telling her no is not an option. Let me just put, and I think it's very important. I think most of you, if not all of you on this, understand this, but I had to make sure that people understand the breadth of what Israel is going through. We all know the hellacious attack of Hamas on upwards of, probably 13 or 1,400 Israelis, the single biggest terrorist attack in the history of the state of Israel, without question. Number two, I think it's imperative that people understand the breadth of what Israel is going through. Think about this for a minute. It is the equivalent of every American, 350 million so Americans, having a loved one, knowing someone that was in 9/11, that in the Twin Towers. This is what Israel is going through right now. Every single person in the state of Israel, the 9 million people live in Israel, are now engaged in this in a personal level. Either their family member has been kidnapped, they were killed in this horrifying concert. The Hamas just, mowed down innocent kids, young adults, mothers, fathers. But every single Israeli now is either feeling this personally, or their family member has been called up. Anyone who's under 50 has been called up. So the whole country, when I emphasize this, the whole country, left and right, Hamas has done something that hasn't happened since the beginning of this country, has united the country on the very clear view of they must decapitate Hamas. Okay, that is the vision, the view, and strongly supported by the United States of America. And I want to say, step back for a second. Heather and I have talked about, put politics aside. If you love Joe Biden or hate Joe Biden, you love Democrats or hate Democrats, I don't care. It's irrelevant. Joe Biden has, in my view, shown a level of commitment to the state of Israel that surpasses anyone's wildest expectation. I've been telling people this from the get-go. It's who Joe Biden is. Regardless if you think he's too old or too young or too liberal or whatever, his support for the state of Israel is in his kishkas. It is who he is as a person. I remember it very well in last July when he came to Israel for his 10th visit. He stood up and said the following: "You do not need to be a Jew to be a Zionist." And I say this again and again because his history with Israel is showing full force of what And so to be clear, the president's view is very simple. One, we stand protection of the state of Israel. Make no mistake, we are with Israel and what Israel needs to do. That has been the president's voice by way of both Republicans and Democrats, but he happens to be the president today. Second issue, which I think is very important, for those actors out there, Hezbollah and Iran, that are thinking about taking advantage or getting into this fight, Joe Biden's been very clear, do not do that. Because as he likes to say, superpowers don't bluff. He's moved 2 massive operations into the Mediterranean. He's very much focused on saying a very strong message to Hezbollah and the Iranians, don't do it. And 3, I think it's important to say, he obviously has a moral compass about humanitarian crisis. I don't think any of us on this call are happy to see innocent Palestinians. By the way, to be clear, 97% of the Palestinians living in Gaza want nothing to do with Hamas, nothing to do with Hamas. And sadly, they are going to be victims of this because it's exactly what Hamas wants to have happen. They knew what they were doing when they attacked Israel. They knew Israel would retaliate in a very ferocious way, and they don't care about the Palestinian people. And I keep reminding people over and over and over again, Hamas is an ideology. It's a jihadist movement. This is not a group of people that are sitting around saying, let's come up with a 2-state solution.
Right.
Talk about, education, healthcare for Palestinian people. No, their goal is to destroy the state of Israel. And ultimately, that is what we, meaning the international community, led by the United States and its supporters, are going to do whatever we can to make sure that those other actors out there don't get involved in this in a very secure way. This is why the president is going to Israel tonight.
Wonderful. Well, and I think everybody on this call, we are all extraordinary. Anybody that's standing with Israel today, we are in one accord and in one voice, and appreciate so much at this point the leadership of President Biden, and the role that he's taken has been very, very clear. And so I want to just say to all of us, it feels, Tom, like we are at an inflection point where, sometimes when the worst possible evil is exposed to the utmost degree, it can change and sort of reorient perspective. And I think that it's interesting as it concerns Iran, who is clearly, putting out, constant threats, which is one of the reasons that President Biden has sent a forward carrier strike into the region, the USS Gerald Ford, our most advanced aircraft carrier with 5,000 U.S. sailors, and then now adding 2,000 Marines to the region with an additional aircraft carrier. It's a huge show of force. And it seems that he's made clear that effort is not only to assist and support Israel in their win over Hamas, but in an attempt to deter the Iranian-backed Hezbollah in Lebanon and any other nefarious actors. Yesterday, Iran's foreign minister, Hossein Amir Abdollahian, whatever his last name is, said yesterday that the possibility of a preemptive action by our resistance axis should be expected in the coming hours. So we're looking at a war that could rapidly expand. And it's concerning to everyone, to the United States, to Israeli leaders, to everybody that's watching. What do you believe the U.S. would be willing to do should Hezbollah open another front in this war theater?
Well, but as you pointed out, Heather, which I think is important for people to understand, the president has made a commitment to have Israel's back. And so if Israel is attacked, you can assume we will take the appropriate actions to push back. One of the things we hope that doesn't happen. And that's why he has made a decision to move proactively to send the 2 carriers that you've mentioned to it. It's a massive amount of force, both air power, which is very important because this is the situation. So as Joe Biden is likes to say over and over again, superpowers don't bluff. Don't screw with us, okay?
Right.
Don't do it at your own peril. That's a diplomatic term, by the way, just for record. But I think it's very important that we understand where the United States stands. We stand for the state of Israel, the security of the state of Israel. We're against Hamas. We're against the extremists. We want to do what is needed to do, which is eliminate the threat against the state of Israel.
Tom, does it surprise you that Iran is edging toward a confrontation, a real confrontation with the United States and Israel. Does this surprise you?
Listen, it's rhetorical flourishes we've been listening to, sable rattling for a long time. We have to take it seriously. Listen, we're vulnerable right now, at least perception-wise, in the Middle East. People take advantage of it. That's why Biden's doing what he's doing. That's why the Congress, what they're doing. That's why Republicans and Democrats joined together in support of the president's comments about the state of Israel and the importance of it. Yeah, do I think, how much do I believe is bluster? How much do I believe is real? Listen, the calculation that Iran is going to make is the following. They have two major proxies in the Middle East. They have many more, but two major ones. We have Hamas, obviously, in Gaza, which is a military operation, which is a jihad, which is supported, obviously, financially by Iran. And they have Hezbollah, okay? Both of them have the goals of destroying and doing degradation in the military of the state of Israel and the people of it. So they'll have to make a decision. Clearly, right now, the Hamas is on its back foot and will be destroyed by Israel. There's no question about it. Do you get rid of Hamas? I don't think the complexity of it. It's an ideology. It's like ISIS. It's not as simple as that. It's just taking out the infrastructure, taking out the leadership, but they will make an effort to do that. Yeah, Iran's going to have to make a decision. Do they want both Hezbollah and Hamas destroyed, as they're two bigger proxies, and we will destroy both of them. So ultimately, that'll be a decision that the Iranians will have to make. Our working assumption is, we can be clear, they're working diplomatically around the world to make sure Iran gets the message that we're serious. But is it a threat? Sure, it's a threat, and I think we all should understand it. And it's a reason why Joe Biden is going to the region. This trip is not without peril. This is not.
Right.
You don't normally go to in the middle of a war zone. You try not to do.
It's amazing.
But he's doing it because he wants to send a message of solidarity with the state of Israel and send a message to the other bad actors out there. Don't mess with us.
That's so good. And thank you for that answer. And that's exactly what we all really need to hear. The American people need to hear what you just said. And so President Biden he's going to be in the region. He's going to be in Israel on Wednesday. He has shown unprecedented support, but he's going to be arriving to a war front and to a grieving nation that is absolutely in shock and in trauma. And his presence is a huge message of support to Israel. And there's no adequate words to express the appreciation for that. Nevertheless, U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, blasted Russia yesterday for failing to mention Hamas in the Security Council resolution, calling for an immediate ceasefire in the ongoing war. And by failing to condemn Hamas, she said Russia is giving cover to a terrorist group that brutalizes innocent civilians. It's outrageous. It's hypocritical. It's indefensible. In her speech to the UN Security Council yesterday, she explained the U.S. decision to vote against the resolution, that the vast majority of families in Gaza are suffering through no fault of their own, that Hamas has set up a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. They are the ones that set it in motion, and we cannot allow this council to unfairly shift the blame to Israel and excuse Hamas for its decades of cruelty, period. What a strong word from our U.S. ambassador to the UN Security Council yesterday. How important is it for our U.S. leadership and Western allies to be speaking out right now to condemn Hamas and provide Israel the support that they need until they have prevailed over this terrible enemy?
Well, I think you nailed it. I mean, listen, Linda is a friend of mine. She's articulating the views of the president, not just her own. Obviously, she believes in this strongly. No one should misunderstand. This was Hamas's plan. The plan is to do exactly what they are doing, to make it a brutal attack to Israel. I think they probably were more successful than they ever anticipated, right? To make a brutal attack, take innocent children and old people and kidnap them and bring them back to Gaza. Okay. What they knew and want to do is to basically, they don't care about their people. They know what is going to happen. They're telling innocent Gazans to stay in their homes in the north. Okay. And they know quite well Israel is going to attack and try to destroy and decapitate Hamas. They don't care about the individual Palestinians. This is their view. It's a price to be paid with other people's lives. It's not our problem. Okay. That is the sickness of this. And for those other countries around that don't see this and understand it, is disgusting and despicable. And ultimately, we need to call every one of them out. I mean, I don't
So good.
That the Russians were going to, who are basically just causing a genocide in Ukraine, is going to step up in some way and say, that Hamas is, it's the fault of the Israelis and why Hamas is doing what they're doing. So again, there's going to be a lot of time for recriminations vis-a-vis some of these countries and what they've done. The first and foremost, for people to understand, the United States stays in the forefront with the security of the state of Israel. That is what people should understand.
Well, it has really become apparent on the world stage in an unusual kind of way. It seems like it is an inflection point for world leaders. So lastly, last question, Israel's policy in the past has been to trade prisoners with Hamas, as in the case with Gilad Shalit, where 1,000 Palestinians were swapped for one soldier. There was a lot of criticism over that, and how painful now to realize that those terrorists that were released at that time are now the top leadership of Hamas today, who just carried out the worst attack on Israel in their modern history. So it seems, again, I keep using the word inflection point, but it seems that we're at an inflection point about radical Islamic terrorism, and that strength, force, and deterrence seem to be the only way to operate with these aggressive actors like Hamas, Hezbollah, and even Iran. While talks by the world leaders are underway to free the 200 hostages being held in Gaza, Israel's resolve seems different now. The IDF has made it clear that if hostages are to be returned, it will be the work of the IDF during a ground invasion going door to door to get them. Knowing that there are American hostages involved, Tom, do you believe Israel's approach is appropriate to not negotiate with Hamas over the hostages?
Heather, I'm going to let others talk about that. I mean, all I can tell you is, you imagine, I can't even fathom this, that a mother or a brother or a sister or a husband and a wife are sitting in Israel knowing that their loved one is in some tunnel it's impossible for me to tell you what is the right thing or the wrong thing, because what these families are going through is something that, God forbid, any of us even contemplate going through. So listen, Israel is committed to get these hostages back. How they do it, by what means they do it, I'm going to let the people who are on the ground try to figure this out. So I'm not here to suggest or to question or to determine what the right thing to do is. All I know is Hamas are a group of madmen who are basically have destroying any hope for Palestinian people in Gaza, because they don't care. They're a jihadist organization, no different than ISIS. Their behavior needs to be stopped. Their leaderships need to be decapitated. We need to end Hamas's control of Gaza. That is exceptionally important. And yes, we need to get those hostages back alive and bring them back to their families as soon as possible.
That is really great. Well, Tom, this has been a really helpful call for us, for our community, and those that are really on the wall for Israel every day, giving resources, praying, caring. And I completely agree with your answer. I cannot imagine being in the place of one of those families, and I cannot imagine being the IDF having to try to decide about how to go about this. So it is a complex, more than complex, it is agonizing, and one for which we need to pray and ask God to intervene. Well, Tom, thank you for your time today. You have been a tireless leader, and thank you for your sacrifice in the midst of such difficult times for the state of Israel and also for the United States. We certainly appreciate you.
Thank you, Heather, and I appreciate you as well. Thank you.
Bye. Well, I want to move on and thank all of you for being on this call today, and some of you have just joined. But I want to move on to my good friend and partner who is representing USIEA and our policies on Capitol Hill, as well as in Israel. Ari is former chief engineer of Iron Dome and has been really the chief educator on Capitol Hill on the missile defense systems. And I want to just already direct some questions to you. You have 3 children right now serving in the IDF. One is an officer, one is in a special unit. And I know that it has been very painstaking. What are you hearing in the north of Israel, where you live in Haifa?
I actually live north of Haifa, even closer to the border. The Israeli north is preparing for something that the Israeli south did not have time to prepare for. When we saw what Hamas was capable of, the acts of sheer outrageous, abominable, the things that they did, I don't even want to talk about. You've all seen the pictures, you've all seen the movies. There are certain things you can't unsee, and you'll see them for the rest of your lives. We needed to make sure that that does not happen in the north. On the day of the terror attack on October the 7th, the country of Israel, called up 300,000 reserves. A large portion of those reserves went to the north of the country, where we have Hezbollah at our northern border. There's supposed to be UN forces, UNIFIL forces, in the south of Lebanon. Those forces are a waste of time, a waste of oxygen. They do not serve any purpose. Hezbollah is up to the border. We needed to use these people to juice up the IDF in case of a Hezbollah assault, and B, to protect the towns on the north of Israel. Some of I'm not going to say where everybody is, but some of my sons-in-law are in towns on the northern border, near the northern border, in case of a Hezbollah incursion, to make sure that these towns are well and truly protected. We have preemptively we've evacuated, taken people out of their homes for an indeterminate amount of time. People that are living up to 2 kilometers, which is about a bit less than a mile and a half from the northern border, because we cannot guarantee their safety. We need to pull them away. There's going to be high intensity fighting over there. We need them out. Over the last few days, there has been intermittent rocket fire, intermittent drones, similar to the drones that the Russians are using, Iranian drones that they're using in the Ukraine. There have been anti-tank weapons fired left, right, and center. I think we've more than a dozen anti-tank weapons, and understand that an anti-tank weapon is intended to kill. Some of these have been fired at IDF outposts. Some of these have been fired at a person who was fixing up someone else's house. That was his job. He builds houses, and he was building a house, and the house took an anti-tank missile, and the guy died. It's horrific. We now know what Hezbollah is capable of. I think we had an idea, but when you see it portrayed so graphically by Hamas, we look at it differently. We are not going to make the same mistake that we made in the South. In the South, we based our strategy on high tech and a small army. Here we have high tech, and we're beefing up the small army. That small army was overwhelmed on Saturday, October the 7th. We designed that barrier next to Gaza, high-tech barrier with remote control, weapon stations, and barbed wire, and it was 150 feet deep so that people wouldn't tunnel underneath it. But the Hamas, they said, we're not going to beat you with high tech, we're going to beat you with low tech. And people talk about Iranian fingerprints being on this terror attack. Maybe, but they didn't need Iran. Hamas did not need Iran. Hamas low-tech us. We got beaten with low-tech. They dug tunnels. Instead of digging underneath the wall, underneath the barrier, they dug tunnels up to the barrier. They came out of the tunnels en masse, and we had no idea what to do with the tremendous amount of people. We were understaffed. It was a weekend. It was a holiday weekend, and most of the people went home. The IDF high-tech, our see and shoot observation posts that have remote-controlled guns, were taken out with drones, with DJI Phantom drones that you can buy on Amazon. Any person knows anything about electronics can outfit these things with a mechanism that drops things like grenades. And they came out of the holes. They put grenades on these DJI Phantoms. They went from observation post to observation post, boom, boom, boom. And we were, in a matter of seconds, we were blind. Israel owns the electromagnetic spectrum in Gaza. We have the uncanny ability to eavesdrop on cell phone conversations, which is how we know where people happen to be to bomb the right houses. But to bypass this, the Hamas used couriers and not cell phones. We had no human intelligence, because we have not had boots on the ground since 2005. They used their low tech to an advantage, and they killed more than 300 soldiers that day using low tech. That will not happen again in the North, sheerly because of the bulk of the forces that are there and our high level of preparedness.
Wow, that is such a great, real critique on what just happened. And people are fishing and trying to figure out how in the world could there be such a failure of intelligence and an inability to do this. But you've explained it so well. It was low tech. It was, not using the internet. It's really extraordinary. So in view of that, Ari, knowing that there is a real potential for a multi-front war to open up this week. I mean, Iran is promising, and I know they're full of air, but they also sort of aren't full of air. They're sort of actually supporting, directing, and funding terrorist attacks. So what are your concerns? And you said it really well. We're thinking like we weren't thinking before this attack. So how are you thinking in terms of attacks were, say, launched from Syria and Lebanon, or from the Houthis who have rockets in Yemen, and you start having rockets come from different directions? Is Israel prepared for a multi-front war, including the defense missile systems to defeat these attacks in multi-directions?
We say from the outset that Israel is fully prepared for a multi-front war. We are prepared to fight simultaneously in Gaza and in Lebanon and in Syria if need be, including having boots on the ground. We have a tremendous number of soldiers that have been drafted to add to the bulk of our standing army. We have weapons, we have offensive weapons, we have defensive weapons. We do not want to fight a multi-front war. This war was started to uproot and to decimate Hamas. Hamas, as far as we're concerned, Hamas and ISIS are one and the same. We don't want to blur the lines. Yes, Hezbollah is a terrorist organization, but currently our beef is against Hamas. We need to go in and destroy Hamas. We need to make sure that we never have to continue living the way we lived before. And then we'll solve that problem in our northern border. So what happens if there is a multi-front war? So I've been saying until now that there's the Hezbollah has been dabbling in low intensity conflict over the last week or so. If they open fire on us, then we will have to defend against rocket fire. And Hamas still has a certain amount of rockets. We don't know how many they have. We believe that their supplies are dwindling, but every so often they open up a salvo against Tel Aviv. Most recently, earlier this afternoon, we have the weapon systems Iron Dome and David Sling that have been working, doing a yeoman's job, giving us the kind of performance that we've gotten used to, the 90+% performance, combined with the three prongs of our missile defense, which is A, the ability to detect rocket fire, determine where it's going to land. B, people are well taught to go to bomb shelters as soon as they hear the alarm. And C, our missile defense systems, these rockets, the effect has been reduced to more like a nuisance, as it were. Less worried about Hamas, much more concerned about the 150,000 rockets that Hezbollah has. Some of these rockets are equipped with precision guidance, will enable them to land where they are fired, as opposed to the Hamas ones, which will land wherever they land. Hamas are out terror. Terror is when you fire, you walk into a room, you blindfold yourself and you open fire. That's what the Hamas is doing. Hezbollah has the capability to take out Israeli infrastructure. They can take out our gas rigs. They can take out our electric power plants. They can take out our desalination plants. These are things that we need to worry about. We have the capability to defend ourselves. We have the assets. The United States is bulking up our assets with Iron Dome interceptors that were sold to the U.S. that have not yet yet been used by the U.S., and there are more coming off the line all times, coming off the assembly line in Israel, with many of the parts being produced in the United States. If Syria opens fire, that'll increase our multi-layer missile defense system. It'll add more players, Arrow 2 and Arrow 3, which are anti-missile systems for longer range rockets that would come from Syria, from Iran, and from South Yemen as well. We are able to defend ourselves, and we are able to project power. We do not want a multi-front war, but we are not afraid of a multi-front war. With the help of God, we will defeat Hamas and defeat anybody who wants to do us ill. The guardian of Israel neither sleeps nor slumbers.
Well, Ari, thank you for that incredible overview, because I think people are looking and watching the news and going, how in the world is little Israel going to be able to defend itself if Iran steps into the picture through Syria and Hezbollah and the Houthis in Yemen, and we start into this regional type of war that sort of blows open. And it is so encouraging to see this. You know, you and I were on a call last week with 15 members of Congress. Some of those were leading armed services, and we had that an hour and almost 30-minute discussion with them. It was supposed to be 30 minutes, but it was so riveting and became so important that nobody budged for about an hour and 20 minutes. And one of those was Doug Lamborn from Colorado, and he was really clear. You know what? We just bought Iron Dome. We purchased a lot of Iron Domes, the United States did, that are just sitting here in our country. We will now turn and just give all of those back to Israel immediately. And that decision was made on the phone call. Well, this is kind of what USIEA is doing, working closely with Congress, getting into these discussions that they don't have time to focus on, and being able to educate and identify where the needs are. And Congress is on both sides of the aisle very, very willing to help Israel, to support. And it really goes back to the prophecy of Isaiah 60:11. The foreigners are going to rebuild your walls, O Israel, and their kings are going to serve you. Though with anger I struck you, with great compassion I am bringing you back. And the wealth of nations will come to you, kings being led in procession to you. For the nation that will not serve you will perish and be destroyed. Well, it seems to me that our American leaders have taken that seriously to an nth degree. And there's a lot of unity today around this very humongous, disastrous situation in the Middle East. And I want to just give thanks to you, Ari, for playing a dynamic and tireless role as inside the defense missile arena, and the incredible role that you've played in the building and the engineering of Iron Dome. It's a legendary feat. It is something that will be talked about for the generations. It has been Israel's wall of defense to this point. And we just all want to thank you for that. And so I want to just say that we're at a time like no other, as I've said, at an inflection point in Israel's history, in Western civilization, about how we go forward to deal with these rogue and state actors of terror. Number one, Iran, who is really leading the way. And I want to just call on you to take this very seriously, to be on the wall, to be vocal in your words and in your deeds. That is reaching out to your congressman and saying, we want your vocal support in the media. We want town hall meetings around this. We want Israel to be supported to the nth degree as she goes through this war. And I want to also encourage you to follow our updates in education, to stay tuned, because we're going to be doing more briefings like this. We're engaging our congressional leaders at this point in a very dynamic way. And we're asking them to go in pairs as Democrats and Republicans into the media to speak and to stand with clear and full-throated support for Israel's war on Hamas. Well, we need your prayers, and Israel needs your prayers at this time, and financial support. You know, our organizations, JH Israel and USIEA, are involved in a very sacred work. JH Israel is supporting Israel's National Leadership Center in the middle of the country, where Israel's defense forces are training. And USIEA is educating and serving members of Congress toward a strong, important collaboration between the U.S. and Israel. If you go back to your email where you registered for the briefing, there's a button that allows you to contribute. And we would love nothing more than to have you contribute to one of our organizations. And you can also access those organizations through the websites. Well, I want you to stay close. We are so appreciative. So many of you have been partners of ours for years and have been alongside us this whole time. And we just want to thank you very, very much for your willingness to make sacrifices in this last week and in the weeks to come on behalf of the nation of Israel. Thank you for joining us.